I know how to measure these things.
It's going to be very interesting if that becomes a criteria in which people are hired. You know, if it really does become a thing and it becomes something where people are accepting that as an education and seeking people out in that regard, it's going to be very interesting to see if more of those emerge. If you start a trend and then...
Well, at minimum, we can assure a potential employer of two things. We didn't attract a woke crowd, and we didn't indoctrinate our bloody students. So that's not a bad minimum. You know,
Right.
You can assure intelligence, you can assure a work ethic because they've completed the course material and properly. We can ensure that's properly measured. But we can also say, here's a bunch of things they didn't learn. Right? And the courses are subversive in the most traditional possible way. So we have Larry Arnn, for example, who's the president of Hillsdale. He did a lecture series on Churchill. Now, where are you going to go to university to get a lecture series on Churchill? And Arnn was Churchill's primary biographer, or one of his primary biographers, so that's a big deal. You know, we've got Nigel Bigger from Oxbridge lecturing on the legacy of UK colonialism. Well, you're not going to get that anywhere else. And he's a great lecturer, and he's a brilliant man and very, very courageous. And Larry Arnn is in exactly the same category. So the technology we're using is revolutionary in a variety of different ways. The lectures are high quality, but the whole ethos of the educational offering is completely different than what is on offer, say, at the typical Ivy League.
Right.
Harvard, for example, which is such a catastrophe. Like, I was there at Harvard in the 1990s. I loved that place. It was really forward-looking and aimed at excellence with very minor exceptions, like truly minor exceptions. It was a powerhouse, man. And I went back and saw a bunch of my old professor friends a month ago, you know, and they've all joined free speech movement at Harvard, and they're fighting against their own administration. And these were like the best professors I ever met in my life. And that's what they've been reduced to.
When did it start? The
Specifically
decay.
in the universities?
Yes.
It started with the incursion of, what would you say, a modified Marxism in the 1960s, and then really accelerated in the 70s. It sort of went like this. You know how things fail, gradually, then suddenly. And it hit critical mass in terms of failure probably around 2014, 15, pretty much when things blew up around me. That's why they blew up around me. You know, I mean,
and
it
what
was
do you
so
think
ridiculous.
ultimately caused it to not course correct? What do you think ultimately caused these universities to give in to that?
Okay, let's talk about ultimate. So
Yeah.
let me tell you a story, an old story. So there's a myth from Mesopotamia called the Enuma Elish, which is one of the oldest stories that we have. And let me just lay out the story, because these ancient myths capture the fundamental dynamics of culture. They're winnowed to do that. Okay, so the Mesopotamians believed that the world emerged as the interaction of two forces. We already alluded to them, chaos and order. They had a god of order, Apsu. He was a male god. He's the patriarchy. You can think of Apsu as the patriarchy. And a female god, Tiamat. Tiamat is a dragon, and a dragon of chaos. And the word Tiamat is the same word etymologically as the word tohu vabohu, and that's the chaos that God makes the world out of at the beginning of time in the Hebrew accounts. Okay, so you have Apsu and Tiamat, and they come together. Chaos and order come together, and they produce the first world. And in the Mesopotamian account of things, that's a world of higher order gods. Now, those higher order gods forget their ancestors and go about their business, and they get increasingly fractious and undisciplined and noisy and hedonistic and immature. And at one point they kill their father, Apsu, and they try to live on his corpse. Right. So you see an echo of this. It's very complicated. You see an echo of this in the story of Pinocchio. You know, there's a scene in Pinocchio where Geppetto ends up in the body of a whale. Okay, so here's the underlying biological dynamic. It's so remarkable. So imagine a society sets itself up according to a set of principles, and it stores, it creates a giant storehouse of wealth.